guess first off, what is this week like for you, and just kind of the ABCs of the combine?
Yeah, the combine is, it's an opportunity for us to get to meet a number of these kids off the ice. For me, it's usually my first opportunity with most of them. Typically, our area scouts have met with them previously and interviewed them. But for myself and a few of our other staff, like Don Sweeney being here and Darren Yopik and Dean Malakoff, it's our first time getting to sort of see these kids off the ice. We see them so much playing hockey and seeing them at the rink, but to get to know them a little bit, ask them some questions, just get a better feel for the personality of the kid. We'll run through, I think we're doing 15 to 17 interviews a day for the first 4 days. So we'll get through a big bulk of the kids who are invited here and, just get a chance to get a little bit of a feel for their personality.
And how long are those interviews? Are they set times or just kind of how it flows?
They're set times. I probably should know since we've done this many of them. I think we get a 15-minute window with each kid, and we have them, sort of spaced out throughout the day. So, we've got to be pretty direct and concise, but at the same time, try and keep it comfortable so the kids don't feel too intimidated and are going to give us, answer the questions and give us a little background and insight into, why they play hockey, what's driving them forward, little bit of a background into, growing up and getting into hockey and other sports they play and just family dynamic and just different things that maybe we can find out that have helped these kids along the way to get to a spot where they're now in consideration to be drafted into the NHL.
How many total do you do, roughly?
I think we roughly did somewhere around probably 85.
85 of the kids.
Does that math make sense? Yeah.
I know in previous years there's been like a consensus number one. That doesn't seem like the case this year. Does that make it more difficult for you, less difficult? Does it have any bearing?
No real bearing unless we're sort of picking 1, 2, or 3. I think by 7 it has a little less bearing. Certainly there's a group of players that have kind of separated themselves at the top. It is a strange year in that there wasn't the McDavid or the Bedard that you go into the year where there's certainly a consensus one and there's nothing that they do all year to really play themselves out of it. So, it was a little different going in this year. We probably had maybe 5 names that we really thought were vying for that top spot. I think it played out in a manner that ended up pretty consistent with what we would have thought.
You think across the 32 teams, not that they're all picking that high, but the top 3, there's a consensus in there, pretty much?
Yeah, I think probably, that number depends, probably each team. Yeah. Some would say maybe there's a top 2, some will say a top 4, top 5, whatever. But I do think there's probably the first 3 picks, I would think in my mind, are pretty set to some degree. The order may still be to be determined based on, each team's preference. But I do think there's probably, certainly 3, maybe 5 that are sort of separate.
I'll ask you about a couple of the names out there. Anton Frundell was the top on the Scouting Bureau's list for the European players. What has stood out about him and maybe what you've learned about him?
Yeah, Anton Frundell is a really impressive player. He played for Djurgården, who won promotion from the Allsvenskan. He played a pretty big role for them the second half of the season. It's an impressive thing for a 18-year-old kid to be able to play at that level. He's a natural center who played on the wing for them, which obviously isn't uncommon in pro hockey. He really impacts the game with his ability to play away from the puck. He's got some strength. He's got a really good frame. He plays a mature game. He can shoot the puck. He'll go to the net. He was a player that on the ice was impressive throughout the year. He started off with some injuries early, but as the year progressed, he was a really good player, and then just a really good kid. Really impressive to sit down and talk with. Really focused, and just seems like a really good prospect.
And James Hagen's over at BC is another kid that's been on a lot of lists. What maybe you've learned about him, and were you able to watch him a lot this year where you had Dean at BC and some other of your prospects there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm based out of Boston, so I got to see James quite a bit. We saw him a lot in previous years as well. He was a key component of the U.S. national team development program and a driver there, and was able to step into Boston College and play on their top line with some really good players. And watching him and the way he skates and the way he can attack open ice and the way he can create space, and he's got such good skill and vision, and he's such a good driver. It was impressive to watch him this year, and his game is really come along. He's gotten stronger. It helped to be in college and take on that challenge. Even after school to now, he's worked really hard to put on some extra muscle. And getting to know James and spending a little bit of time with him, he's comes from a really great family. He gets to play with his brother at Boston College. Both his parents were 8th grade teachers. He's just a really impressive kid. He's got a young sister who's a pretty good hockey player too, and just a good family dynamic. And just spending a little bit of time with him, it's been good to see him off the ice and get to know him.
One other kid that caught my eye was Jake O'Brien. Seems like a little bigger body, another forward. Maybe what has stood out about him and what you've learned?
Sure, Jake O'Brien's a really skilled and he's got a lot of vision, a lot of good offensive creativity. He had a really good year in Brantford. They're one of the top teams in the Ontario Hockey League. He helped to drive the bus offensively for them. He's got a little bit of length. He's worked hard throughout the year in improving his skating. He's able to play both sides of the puck. He takes a lot of responsibility in the D zone. His play has been really impressive. He kind of plays a pretty mature game, but yet has some excitement offensively. He can really manipulate the time and space. He tends to want to slow the game down a little bit because he's so good with the puck. But it's been fun to watch him play and just how many points and his impact at the OHL level.
I'll throw in a couple generic ones that might be good for you guys. You've been at this 7 or 8 years in this capacity. You haven't had a pick this high.
No.
There's got to be extra juice in that for you. On a personal level.
Yeah, no, it's been exciting. Obviously, we've had a lot of excitement as a staff with the team's success over a number of years. But to be put in this situation from a scouting standpoint, yeah, it's fun. You're fishing in different water. I spent a lot of time, particularly leading into the trade deadline and thereafter, focused on players that were potentially going to be in the lottery range, which just quite frankly hasn't been part of my job for quite a while. So going to the rink, watching some of these prospects and just how good they are, how they can impact games, it's been fun. It really has been exciting to think that we've got an opportunity to add a high-level prospect to our organization.
I remember talking to you here, however many years ago now, well, it wasn't that long ago, about Michkov. And there was some question, he was a kid who was projected number 1. He ended up going where he did to Philly. Do you think you could have a situation this year where a real prime kid, if you will, falls through to 7?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly there's reason to pay attention to sort of the public list and where public has them. We obviously have our own draft board that
Yep.
you know, we don't look at necessarily. You know, when someone says a kid's sliding, well, he may not be sliding on our draft board. Like we have him set where we have him set. So there's a lot of good players in this year's draft. There's a number of players that, just depending on where you want to look publicly, could be slotted in different areas. I think, sort of back to Jim's question earlier, it is a little bit more wide open this year, where we do feel there's maybe a few guys at the real top part of the draft, but after you get past them, you could see players go in any different order. And I think that's kind of the root of your question, that, you know, you could see players that maybe were thought of as going at the beginning of the year 1, 2, or 3, maybe slide to 5, 6, 7, or 8. You know, so there's a lot of good players, and I think we're going to be excited with the player that we're going to be looking at when we get up to pick, you know, at 7, if in fact, you know, that's the pick we make.
Right. Was there a lesson in the Michkov thing?
Well, I think there's always a lesson. Yeah. You know, we're always looking at the draft and being prepared, kind of what can happen. You know, going in, playing out different scenarios, and understanding that the draft isn't going to go exactly the way the public list may have it, or exactly the way our draft board may have it, and that we need to be prepared for different scenarios and different players sliding from where we had originally projected, or for where, again, maybe public has them. Our job is to really be prepared for any scenario, and know that on our draft board, for instance, at 7, that we're very comfortable with any player 1 through 7, so that whoever's available, we've done our homework, we know what we're getting, and we're very comfortable making that selection.
How important is the work that the Central Scouting does to supplement your department?
Sure. I mean, Central Scouting plays a really valuable role in terms of helping to identify players in all different regions. They provide a lot of help to us throughout the year in terms of injuries and changes to schedules. They do a lot of verified heights and weights that are really helpful on our end. And there's a lot of people who are very passionate about scouting at Central Scouting that, you know, do a really good job of identifying players and putting them in sort of their order, which, you know, we do look at, we do pay attention to, but ultimately, you know, we've got our own sort of interest of what drives the Boston Bruins and what players we feel will have the most impact for us. And, you know, each team probably has a little bit different idea of what specifics they're looking for, what they value more than others in certain players, or have different views of those players. Oftentimes, you know, if I go in and see a guy 3 or 4 times, it's a very small sample size. It's a very small snapshot into the player. So often it depends on what other games other staff members have seen, to really give us a broader picture of how that player plays, where his impact, you know, tends to be, you know, and some of that with Central Scouting and others will, you know, give us an idea of how others perceive the player.
All this said, and I have this back and forth with readers and fans all the time, is that they're 18-year-old kids.
Or younger.
Or a touch younger, right. So the Bruins fan who's sitting at home thinking at the end of June, the number 7 pick will come in and they'll see him in October. The chances of that, I think, are remote, but what's your sense of that and the draft at large?
Right. So it's certainly remote that a player is going to come in and be able to make the Boston Bruins out of training camp. A lot of them, as we know, don't even get to training camp because they're going the college route, so they don't even have that opportunity to come in. You know, it's such a big jump for a lot of these kids. Some of them aren't physically or mentally ready to handle the grind and the pressure of playing in the National Hockey League. and while in each draft there tends to be sometimes 1, 2, or 3 players that we feel could make that jump, we're certainly more focused on where they're going to be in 3, 5, 7, 10 years and where they're going to end up then than where they may be tomorrow. Certainly it's the player development process and the process of a player going from a prospect and depending on which level they're playing at now to playing in the National Hockey League can take some time. And we've been a real patient organization in terms of not having to rush players along and push them through, partly due to our success on the ice at the NHL level, that we haven't had as many holes or needs to fill, nor have we really had the draft capital to fill it anyway.
Favorite week of the year?
Draft week. Yeah. I enjoy the combine, but draft week's my favorite week of the year.
And different this year.
Yeah,
right.
Real exciting, and not just picking 7. We have,
I was thinking more just logistically.
Oh, logistics.
Yeah,
logistically, even to have our whole staff together in an environment where we can really talk through the draft and communicate as an entire group throughout the process without having sort of our competitors sitting right next to us. It's just
no clipboard.
Right. It's just I think we'll enjoy it. We'll see where it goes from here, but at least for this year, we'll try and enjoy it and spend that time, really working collaboratively as a group, really in an environment where we can communicate openly.